Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
This week at Safeway, shop the 10 for $10 produce sale. With the 10 for $10 produce sale, get items like large avocados, mangoes, green, red, orange, or yellow bell peppers, cucumbers, large lemons, or 16-ounce bags of Signature Farms baby-peeled carrots for the member price of just $1 each. Plus, select meats like Signature Farms 80% lean ground beef and Signature Select extra meaty pork loin back ribs are buy one, get one free this week. Hurry in before these deals are gone. Visit Safeway.com for more deals.
Did you know you can advertise on podcasts?
Don't act like you're not impressed.
Find out more at podvertise.com.au. That's podvertise with an s.com.au.
Ozcast.
Welcome back to another episode of The Nest, an eventful week for the West Coast Eagles, that is for sure. A big call made. Drew Jones, my sidekick, on the list, and a player who I think has been dear to the hearts in Eagles fans in recent times, in Lewis Jetta. Lewis has been told his time is up. What was your reaction to the decision, and what do you make of the call?
Hello, Garby, and g'day to the Nest family. Sad about Lewis Jetta. That was my first reaction. I think once Witherden came through the door, we had a feeling that probably spelt the end for Lewis Jetta in West Coast colours. But yeah, it's been an eventful career. You know, it was a great result for us to get him back from Sydney, and he leaves us a premiership player and, you know, a really popular and memorable member of our squad.
We'll go through our best 22s on this episode as well. So we'll take stock, now that that call's been made, of exactly where the Eagles' best 22 sits at this stage, which probably won't change too much because the trade period's been done. The new draft pick coming in is not exactly going to work his way straight into the best 22. So injuries aside, of course, that come with pre-season, it'll be what we think is the best 22 to run out for round one next season, which is always a good talking point. But you know, on Jetta, when there was so much deliberation, Drewy, as to whether he would stay on the list or not, I was toing and froing as to whether it was the right call or wrong call to cut him. When the call was made last night, it just hit me that as tough as it is and as big of a shame as it is, because he was, a good contributor and such a great leader and clubman, according to all reports, it's just 100% the right call. It really is, because I just don't see how he plays. So we've got Witherden coming in, which fills his role 100%, that elite kicking player from half-back. And then, of course, we've got Cole and Hearn and Shepherd and Nelson and Rotham as the half-back options. So you've got to bring young players through, and on form, I don't see how he takes any of those players out the team. He doesn't have the engine to play on the wing. And then up forward, we've got Langdon coming in to fill that role. Obviously, Ryan already there, and Cripps already there. And then you've got the likes of Jared Cameron and Petruccelli, who are young players pushing through. Plus, more to the point, and the main reason why I think they've made this call is we just have to rejuvenate the list. We've got to get more youth onto the list because it's an ageing one. And if you've got one of those elderly players who aren't a lock for the 22, well, it's very tough to stay on. So as difficult to call as it is, I think it's one they 100% had to make.
Yeah, especially with the reduced list sizes, and they need to keep an eye on the salary cap as well. So, Jetta goes out and they're bringing in probably a younger player to replace him, like you're saving, X amount of money, whether it's 200 or 250K in salary cap, but also you're bringing through someone who hopefully could be at the club for 10 to 12 years. So just looking at his stats, he only played 75 games for the Eagles, which is, it's amazing. It feels like, it almost feels like we've had him for most of his career. But, he was, exceptional at Sydney and won a flag. And, of course, he ended up being a pretty key player for us. Once he slotted into that half-back role, he really found his niche at West Coast, and he's been one of our most exciting players to watch. There's about a 3.5 minute tribute video which West Coast has put up. So if you haven't watched it yet, you have to, because it gives you such a great idea of the unique skill set that Lewis Jetta brought to the AFL. Like some of those kicks that he can hit after breaking into space or dancing around a couple of opposition players. Like there's not many guys in the AFL who can do that. So it's sad that we're losing someone of that talent. But he also did the hard things. He defended well. And the fact that he was so well liked by everyone involved at the club, and then also played such a big role in helping nurture and develop our young Indigenous players, we're going to miss that immensely. I'm sure that Lewis has worked really closely with Chance Bateman to create a great environment for Liam Ryan, Francis Watson, and particularly I think his relationship with Willie Rioli was really important, Garby, because I think Willie was the one that really needed that guidance. Willie, we know that he lost a lot of weight in order to get drafted, but then he did his hamstring early in his Eagles career, and he went up to the Tiwi Islands during his recovery from his hamstring. And there were times where the club couldn't get in contact with Willie sort of on a regular basis, but I think that Lewis Jetta was, and that makes a difference. So that's just one example of the role that he played at West Coast, and 202 games, a lot of great memories, and a couple of premierships. He has every right to be really proud.
Hey, you know this like I do. Sometimes in the media, there's something that means a bit more to you and you put a bit more effort into your work. I reckon that was the case with the Lewis Jetta tribute video. The guys in the media department, because anyone who's followed the Eagles on social media or, when it comes to those videos, Lewis is always front and centre. He's always there giving them some entertainment, pulling a funny face, just giving them something to work with. So I think they were really tight with him and they felt really emotional about the decision. They put more work into that tribute video than they would for almost any other player. As you said, only 75 games and he gets an almost 4-minute video. And so much of that tribute video was just a kick out of the back line or a chase and a tackle, which players don't usually get for those sorts of videos. It's always the absolute high moments. So they've obviously gone back through all the archives to really show you what Lewis Jetta was all about. But the one moment I was waiting for throughout the video, Drewy, and everything you said before about his leadership for the Indigenous players, I concur with. But that one moment that I just couldn't wait to watch again with that music in the background was the snap against the Pies for that win in the final, and then
the Ronaldo celebration.
The celebration, which was just brilliant. I mean, that's like Eagles folklore now. So that was just a moment that you watched it back and you just started smiling again. And, it was obviously such a crucial win in terms of securing the 2018 flag.
Yeah, I don't know if we win the flag if he doesn't kick that goal. So it may go down as one of the most, alongside Dom Sheeds, but one of the most important goals in that 2018 season and maybe in the history of the club. No
doubt. And the other moment that was crucial from him en route to the flag was the chat he has with Liam Ryan. I don't know if it was I think it was a 3/4 time when Liam Ryan's just struggling a bit. Really all he's done that game is lay that big hit on Maynard. He missed a shot he should have obviously nailed. And you just see Jetta at the break going up to him and having a word and just settling him down and giving him confidence. And then, of course, Liam Ryan does what we all know he does in the final term. So little moments like that are worth so much more than an extra 10 possessions, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think Liam had pulled out of that marking contest, so I'm sure that he was probably
that was the
rattled
moment
in the grand final. So yeah, that's just a great example of what he offered. Not just with ball in hand. One of my favourite memories of Lewis Jetta, and I don't know if we've spoken about this before, but it was the Port Adelaide elimination final. A couple of times, he was the only player who was able to just break the lines and burst through. Like, we had started that game so well, and then really from about halfway through the second quarter till the end of the game, Port Adelaide were banging down the door, and we managed to hold on and draw the game. But a couple of times, Jetta would just burst onto a contested ball, break away. He nailed a couple of torps, just to get some territory, just to get us going. He was almost our most important player on the night because he just offered something a little bit different. We had those aging legs, we had Pritis and Mitchell in the midfield, and a few of the older guys running around, he was crucial. But that was what he offered, and that's why he was such a dangerous player. And I wanted to share an anecdote just with the listeners and with you, Garby, about Jetta from early in his West Coast career. And I feel like enough time has passed that the person who told me this story won't mind me sharing it. But do you remember that he was getting a bit of criticism early in his West Coast career about not wanting it enough, and his performances wasn't up to scratch for being a high-profile recruit? And someone at West Coast sort of said to me, they were like, "Don't worry about Jets. Don't listen to all the noise. Like, we're completely ignoring it. Like, we're fully confident in him." When he obviously, straight away he developed a rapport with the playing group, but he had this situation where he just moved back to Perth, and being a Noongar, such a big family presence, and he actually had a couple of situations where he had so much family visiting him because he was back in town that they were almost crowding him out of his own house. So a couple of times he had to sleep on the couch or sleep on the floor because he just had so many people. And Lewis is the kind of guy who's like, he'll give up his bed and his spare room and all of that, to his family or his older family or whatever he had to do. So his preparation sometimes for training and even for games wasn't probably where it needed to be, but only because of his commitment to his family. And that was something that really stuck with me, that I was like, this guy is like, he's more than just footy, like he's a good person.
Yeah, great yarn. Great to hear. And look, there's some players in the past who have moved back from the eastern states to Perth and have struggled with that. I know Des Headland and Jeff Farmer, there were lots of stories that they struggled with, the family responsibilities and the demands when they returned to Perth with a high profile and big money and so on and so forth. But Jetta got through that and was a great contributor. So, yeah, look, he wasn't perfect by any stretch. I mean, there were moments, you talk about some of the criticism. I used to get frustrated that he didn't do those things you speak about, like the Port Adelaide final, enough. There were sometimes you looked at him and you went, is he playing within himself a little bit? Is he not? Why doesn't he do that all the time? And I'm not sure why that was, but you had the feeling sometimes, is he just a little bit laissez-faire, if you like? And maybe that frustrated Adam Simpson this season, which is why he was dropped, or maybe he just wanted to get younger players through on that back line who he did so well. So that brings me to the next point, Drewy. Does he get picked up? Does Lewis Jetta get a spot on another list? I think it'd be a decent get for a team who requires a top-up player, some leadership, and someone who can provide some class off half-back.
Did you see that Essendon Football Club's Twitter account liked the footy rhino Ryan Daniels posted that Jets wouldn't be there, I think, next season?
You can't read into that, can you?
No, I actually think he wouldn't be a bad fit at Essendon.
I agree.
If you want to plug in a half-back flank who can do a job for you for at least one season, I think you could do a lot worse. I know Matt Suckling's available as well, and he's spoken to Essendon. So half-back's a slot they need to fill because they've lost a couple. But then they haven't offered Marty Gleeson a new contract as well. So I'm also a bit confused about that. So, I mean, who knows? But I think he'd be a chance for sure. There's even North Melbourne, like that. North Melbourne could do a lot worse. They've got a couple of young Indigenous players. To bring in someone of a high caliber character, it's just a question, I guess, of whether Jets wants to move back to the eastern states.
Yeah, obviously, and whether the money's worth it or not. Yep. But Essendon seems to be a really smart fit, some experience as well in leadership because they've lost a bit of that, and some class out of halfback considering Adam Sard's gone. Yeah, it makes sense for them and maybe a couple other clubs as well. So we'll wait and see in terms of that. Right, let's get into our best 22's, Drewy. So now that everything's been done in terms of trade and the major delistings have happened, there could still be another couple that go. I mean, Mark Hutchings and Brendan Archie, maybe we should touch on them before we get on to the best 22. Can you see them surviving? What do you think happens with a couple of those players who are on the fringes?
Yeah, it's a really tough decision for West Coast and what exactly they do. They can have 37 on the senior list, and then you can have up to 44 players in total. So 7 rookies, I think And I'm not sure exactly where Category B rookies fit into that, but it's starting to get pretty tight for West Coast, and they would have to fit in, say, Hutchings and Archie, and then Rioli and Venables within that sort of 44. So my understanding is that West Coast have applied for special dispensation to have Rioli and Venables still tied to the football club, whether that be through a rookie selection or something. But I think they're almost unsure if those two will even play next season. So they don't want to release them from the club. But it's just a question of how do you get them in the 44? More than happy to pay them in the salary cap, of course. So that's a bit of juggling needs to be done, and where the AFL allow them and grant them a bit of flexibility with those two in particular, that might even, decide the futures of a couple of others. So it is a tough one. I guess the question is, what role do Archie and Hutchings play next season, in your opinion?
Well, I've been vocal in saying I think Archie was lucky to play as many games this season as he did. And with Langdon coming in, I don't have him in my best 22. We'll get into that in a moment. So I think he was rather fortunate to play as many games as he did. I see what he brought to the team. I just don't think his output was strong enough to stay in the team for the entire season. So I think he stays on the list, though. I think he provides another forward option, and he's young enough. And I think he can still go up a level. So I'd keep Archie on the list. Hutchings is interesting because he didn't play much this season. We all know what he brings. And I heard Will Schofield speak the other day and say, the Eagles, it was actually an interesting point from him. He said, one thing we do lack is a defensive midfielder, which to me said, sometimes the guys are happy to all go forward and break forward because they're all such brilliant players. Maybe there isn't enough of a desire to sit back and, if you like, just watch your man. And Hutchings obviously does that. So he provides that, but you just worry about a season out at his age when he's a player who lacked a lot of leg speed anyway. Is he at the standard anymore, or has he dropped off too much? I think that's going to be the interesting call. And I'm not confident that he's really going to figure in the 22. I'd rather see a Jack Redden turn into a pure tagger than say Hutchings necessarily get enough of a goal. I'm not sure that he's someone that Adam Simpson will be thinking is in his plans going into next season. So I think he's right on the cut line.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, or it would be a bit of a unique situation if Archie went from essentially a first-choice player to not even being on the list next year. So I wouldn't be surprised if Archie is probably on the rookie list next season. I think the point you make with Hutchings is probably spot on. He didn't look quite up to the speed of things when he played this season, but having spoken to a couple of players who were fringe players in 2020, it was just almost impossible to be ready to go, to come in and play good footy with not being able to play, waffle or VFL or what have you. Like, can you think of any player this season who came in halfway through the year and all of a sudden excelled? Like maybe Jake Riccardi from GWS. I really can't think of anyone else. And that's not their fault. It was just so hard to come in from the cold. So if they feel like with a full preseason and under normal circumstances that Hutchings can still play a role coming in, horses for courses, then maybe he does get another year. But also equally, I think that A, great point about Redden, whether he could play that role, and B, like Jackson Nelson could be the horses for courses tagger in the midfield. Or even you swing Duggan through and he's a bit more accountable. So I think there's probably other options and potentially for the future of the club, better options. But if they're absolutely all in for a flag this year and that's going to be the sole focus of the footy club, then maybe having Hutchings there wouldn't be a bad thing.
Exactly right. Okay, so let's get into our best 22s. From the back line, as they say. Give us your back six on the field for next season, Drewy, and I'll give you mine after.
So backline, Hearn, Barrass, Shepherd, Witherden, McGovern and Duggan is my back six. Is yours similar?
Okay. I've got 5 of the same back six, all in the same slots. So Hearn back pocket, Barrass, Shepherd, Witherden on that half back line, McGovern, and then I've got Thomas Cole at half back. So, you can probably guess where I've pushed Liam Duggan, but I've got Tommy Cole on the half-back line and I'm freeing up Liam Duggan somewhere else. So, yeah, pretty similar in that regard. And it does look like a good back six, doesn't it? I mean, you've got Shepherd, who probably plays a little bit taller, or Hearn does, and you've got the class of Witherden and Tommy Cole, who I think had a really good season. I'm sure you agree. So it's still a very good back six, isn't it?
Yeah, and my back six was the same as yours, but then I juggled a little bit. And the reason being is because I want to see Duggan play through the midfield, but I still think his best position at the moment is that half-back flank. I was just thinking about how good he was this season, particularly when we weren't playing well, and that was his best work was done in the back six. So I've just stuck him there for now.
Okay, the midfield. I'll go first on this one. So I've got Gaff on a wing, Yo through the middle. So I've pushed Duggan to a wing, that wing spot that I've spoken about, which is vacant. I know he doesn't necessarily have the leg speed to play there, and I'd like to see other options go through there, and I think he stays in the midfield either way and can play half-back, but can play on the ball. But maybe he starts on that wing if someone else hasn't grabbed that spot. So that's where I've placed Liam Duggan now, which is basically just to say he moves into the midfield this season. And then Natanui, Tim Kelly, Luke Shuey, pretty obvious ones.
Yeah, so I've got the same, except I've got Sheed on a wing, and that's just more because I just don't know who's going to play on that wing and whether it's just someone rotates through and there isn't a specialist there, or whether they do stick someone there. But, yeah, I've got Gaff on the other wing, Kelly and Shuey and Yo. I mean, having Yo back fit and firing, is pretty exciting, and hopefully Shuey comes into the season sort of free of those soft tissue injuries. And then, if Nick Nat has another full pre-season, it's a pretty menacing-looking midfield.
I actually had my team down and I thought, I'm missing someone. There's definitely someone I'm missing. And I've gone, Elliot Yo. I mean, he missed so much football at the end of last season that I had to scrap out Dom Sheed, who I had in the centre, and put Yo there, and I've put Sheed on the pine. You just go, wow, another super gun to come back into the team. And look, every team had players out, so we weren't, on our own in that one. But, I think he's our best midfielder at his absolute best. I mean, forget last season. There were people saying he was the best player in the comp at certain times. Yep. I mean, he's just that good. And, you talk about that defensive midfielder that we missed. That's Elliot Yo. He does that. He's honestly a true two-way midfielder. He's great going forward, but he will play on the best midfielder as well and beat him when it comes to defensive responsibility. So, an enormous inclusion coming for the start of next season, hopefully. All right, give us your forward line.
All right, Cripps, Darling, Liam Ryan, who I'm super excited about what he can produce. So I've got him on the half-forward flank purely just to almost sort of signify he's got that free roaming role. And then Oscar, Kennedy, and I've got Langdon in a forward pocket.
Exact same forward six. So no changes there at all. It's a good-looking one. I mean, you've got the three talls and you've got the three smalls, one who can push all the way up to the wing and half back in Ryan, Cripps, who does a similar kind of job, and now a true forward pocket. Like, that is Zach Langdon's role. He is a forward pocket sneak. Yes, he can move a bit further up the field and do a job, but, that's going to be his role, getting at the feet of those players, which, Liam Ryan is just better than that, isn't he? So you can't give him solely that role.
Yep.
And Cripps has always been more of a half forward pushing up the ground. So that's exciting that we've got that player who can do it. So the fact that we've named an exact forward six as each other is pretty confidence-inducing, I think, going into the new season.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's, there's a lot of runs on the board in this forward six. Langdon's an unknown quantity, and let's be honest, we've got potentially Jared Cameron pushing him really hard for a spot. We know that there's potentially, a Willie Rioli return in the future. We don't know. And then we've also got, maybe Jermaine Jones or, other, Archie. There's plenty knocking on the door for that spot. So it's not like you're going to be able to cruise and drift through a season in that West Coast front six. You've got to perform.
All right. So my interchange then is Dom Sheed, Jake Waterman, Jackson Nelson and Jack Redden. They're the four I've got on the pine, which gives you the tall in Waterman, two mids in Sheed and Redden, and then Nelson, who can play down back and move to the midfield if you need.
Yeah, so I've got Tommy Cole on the interchange. Obviously, you had him in the front six, the back six, and then Redden, Nelson, and Waterman. So that Jake is now picking himself, like he has to play, and his versatility has made him a really valuable part of our team, because you can push him to that Jack Gunston kind of swingman role. You'll play on a wing if required, and if we were missing one of our talls from the forward line, he instantly slots in to that role. And Jackson Nelson's like our Swiss Army knife. You can sort of plug him in anywhere, and he's got multiple roles. Simo talked a lot about the second and third role training that they do. That's built into Nelson, and that's what makes him. He's not a high profile player, but he's an important player. Did you name emergencies? Have you got sort of the next?
I haven't named emergencies, but we've actually named them the exact same best 22. We haven't concurred before this episode at all. We've got a couple of slight positional changes, but nothing major really. We've actually, without discussing it, named the exact same best 22. That's pretty rare, I would think.
Yeah, and maybe does that speak to the fact that there's not like a crazy amount of depth, do you think? Or there isn't like a crazy, out-of-the-box youngster who's pushing for a spot?
Potentially, yeah. But, there still are some options, which we'll get onto in a moment. But who in your best 22 then, Drewy, would you say is most under pressure? Who's the player that you look at probably from that interchange bench and you go, he really needs, to start well, or he's going to be squeezed out?
Oh, Redden for sure.
Yeah.
And then I think Nelson is always under a slight bit of selection distress, only because you could take him out and bring in another specialist. The fact that he's covering a number of different roles means that he's never an absolute walk-up start. There's always going to be, one person or two people at the very least who are injured or suspended, unavailable. So, it's fanciful to think that is the majority of the games in the season are going to have our best 22. But I think Redden's, he's probably past his peak. So he needs to, work out what's the best way for him to be effective continually.
Yeah, he's the one I've literally got circled on my page as well as, the most under the pump. So the player who was unlucky for me, and I had him in and then I had to take him out, is Josh Rotham. So he probably just gets squeezed out. But there's another, a number of good options there as well in Jared Cameron, in Petrocelli, in Archie, Williams, Jones, Hutchings if he stays on, Venables if he comes right. So, you know what? Maybe there is a bit of an issue there in terms of depth. I think it relies heavily on Cameron finding some consistency, and the same with Petrocelli. But Rotham's the only one that you look at and have, for me, from those players not in the 22, confidence that straight away they come in, they do a job, like guaranteed. The others, I'm not so sure if they're going to deliver. So, maybe depth is a fair concern.
Yeah, so we didn't talk about Jared Brander there. He's in my emergencies, but whether he is straight in, you'd have to carefully consider what role you bring him into. And maybe he's sort of battling with Harry Edwards a little bit for that next tall defender that's in, because Waterman's really the one that replaces, a Kennedy or Darling if they're not playing. But Rotham was that was the obvious one that got squeezed out. But you could make a case for, if Duggan's going to play in the midfield, then Rotham comes into the back six, or, do you need Nelson and Cole, who are both, pretty versatile? So you can find a way to slot him in. But I just think if we've made the effort to, we've went and got Witherden, he's got to be in straight away, and, give him a chance to flourish. In his first season, when he was 18 years old, he comes third in the best and fairest and has a stellar year. He would have probably been top 5 or top 6 in Brisbane's best and fairest. Let him be that guy. Let him settle in. He's got a 2-year contract, and we want him to be at the club for the rest of his career. He's 22 years old. So let's show the faith in him and get him in.
And there's big, bad, bustling Bailey Williams as well, who I think impressed a few towards the end of last season, who I think will be pushing really hard for a spot as well this season. If there's an issue with Nick or Oscar Allen, I think he's probably next cab off the rank. And of course, Vardy is there too as a player we think will stay on the list. So, the depth I think is a bit of an issue, but there's reason for optimism in terms of the upside of a lot of those players. So that's our best 22s for the season coming. Send us your thoughts on Twitter or Facebook and let us know what you think on the nest about the Eagles' best 22s and what changes you would make. Anything more to add on that, Drewy, before we get on to the next point that I wanted to bring up?
Well, I would say they'd be back training in the next probably 3 to 4 weeks. I reckon I heard Witherden talking on the radio about the fact that he was going to fly over and train with the first to 4 years when they come back. So it is a pretty condensed off season, so they'll be back training fairly soon. And the other point is that it looks like we'll probably only use one draft pick. So there'll only be one young player coming in. So you can essentially say that West Coast have pretty much opted out of this year's draft. So you'd think they'll probably take a local player with that pick, which I think is in about the 60s or something. So we're not going to have that influx of young talent, but I'd be staggered if they weren't sort of thinking, next year or the year after is where we stock up on young guys.
But also Witherden and Langdon has helped us replenish just a touch. Langdon only 25, but you think 5 years left at least, and Witherden's got a good 8 to 10. So we have alleviated that problem a touch through the trade period. Hey, some of the messages on Twitter about Lewis Jetta we should probably throw onto the podcast. Hillary Elliott's just sent one through on the Nest Twitter page. Sad moment, but loads of great memories, not the least walking to the game over the Matagara Bridge with the fans. Miss you already, Jets, and your big smile. He did have a connection with the fans that was a bit different to some of the other players, didn't he?
Yeah, no doubt about that. And that's, again, that just comes back to his demeanour and character and how well he was loved.
This one from Ashley Little, although after watching the final episode of Friends, Family and Flags, I found out he played the grand final with a torn calf. That's just massive. He would have liked to see him give it another year off the back of that, which you can understand that sentiment. But I think we've outlined our thoughts on it on the show already.
I see that Ash sort of initially his response was that it was the right call, but then sort of responded to it and saying, he played the GF with a torn calf. Maybe we need that kind of guts and determination around a bit longer. Yeah,
exactly. Trev Clancy, one of the best things watching Jets live at Optus is when he streams out of defence and picks out a teammate. The whole crowd gasps thinking it's a turnover, but he can see what no one else does and hits that player on the chest more often than not, resulting in a goal or an inside 50. He just made things happen, and he loved it when he had the ball in hand because, he would carve like a knife through butter a pass out that no one else could see. And that point of view from someone at the ground, that's always nice to hear, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you remember that one particular highlight from watching the video where he played on from the kick in, sort of ran out to his right, and then at the last second just completely hooked the ball across his body and just nailed a teammate on the left half-back flank? Like, that is the kind of audacious passing range. Like, he's like Xabi Alonso, the way that he could, his range of passing.
Yeah, beautiful to watch. Hey, I just wanted to add before we finish. So the 92 grand final's been on Fox Footy a lot over the last few days, because of the Legends Peter Matera series. So they just play the grand final in that slot, which I've enjoyed. Some things have stood out from that game that I don't know if, people fully saw at the time or have appreciated enough at the time. The game that Ashley McIntosh plays on Billy Brownless, for starters, is truly awesome. Like, Brownless is trying to bully him as this big forward from Victoria with a reputation and all the Cats fans in the crowd. I'm going to show this young kid what it's all about, and how dare you, play on me and think you can match it with me. And McIntosh is just completely unruffled throughout the entire game, gives it back to him without getting over-aggressive, and just beats him, like completely towers him up all game, to the point where at the end, Brownless almost gives up or has expended so much energy trying to fight McIntosh, he can't actually go with him at the contest anymore. Watching it back all these years later, it was just so enjoyable to watch that contest.
I just think it was amazing through that period that Gary Ablett Sr. and Billy Brownless never seemed to really get hold of us. Like, our back six was just so good. And to play against Geelong in so many big games and be able to hold them off and then produce when it mattered But that was what has always, probably actually the longer that the time has passed after those games, and the more that particularly Gary Ablett Senior stands out as one of the best of all time. You know, it makes the effort from the back six, I think, all the more impressive. I'm just trying to find Peter Matera's stats from the 92 GF, because seriously, 18 possessions, 5 goals, 3 from a wing. I mean, how many times has a wingman ever kicked 5 goals in a grand final apart from that?
I wouldn't have thought so. I wouldn't have thought so. Well, the Dusty went pretty close, didn't play in a wing, but played through the middle. Went pretty close in the last grand final, didn't he? In a shortened game as well. So he gave it a fair nudge. But yeah, it was a standout game in that regard. But I just like watching some of the things that haven't been discussed as much all these years later. You speak about Ablett. Worsfold plays on him and does well, but you could tell that there was a message. Whenever he gets the ball, it's almost break off your man and gang-like mentality. Everyone just swarmed to him. So Woosha was on him, but if he ever got half a metre free, someone else is there. Dwayne Lamb was one who was pouncing off his man whenever Ablett got free and was applying some pressure, and he just couldn't break free as a result, which was great to watch. The other moment that stands out, Drew, which I think, whenever great grand final moments get mentioned, you go through so many of them. Chicks, Smother and Shepherd is one that gets brought up. The Leo Barry Mark, yes. Heath Shaw, like a librarian, so many others. How on earth does the 1 minute in the third quarter of Eagles play not get mentioned enough? And that is Peter Wilson, like a cork in the ocean, right? A ridiculous grand final goal that doesn't get discussed. Like a snap over his head. Everyone remembers the commentary. The actual grand final goal doesn't get mentioned. It is ridiculous. He's not like right on the goal line either. He's about 15, 20 metres out, and he's nailed it from there. That brings the Eagles back to within 4 points. And then literally 30 seconds later, Matera kicks his goal on the run. So within a minute, you've got 2 unbelievable grand final goals back to back. How is that not discussed more as a great grand final moment?
Well, I mean, we're discussing it. That's all that matters. Eagles fans will never forget it. Can you do your best, Dennis Cometti?
Wilson, like a cork in the ocean.
What a call. Like, where does that come from?
That is just... Yeah. Like Dennis was young then, right? So, he'd been calling mainstream for a few years, but he's still young. Something like that you can't prepare for. So I think Dennis probably has it down as one of his, if that ever happens, I might use it. But then to have the presence of mind to use it in that moment in a grand final when Wilson is doing the exact bobbing up like a cork in the ocean, I mean, that just summed up the brilliance of the man.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that it's been rolling back through the Fox Footy archives, because it was a great game, but as for West Coast fans, it's to step back in time and watch it. It's incredible. The amount of unbelievably good players that we had at that time. We've been blessed with some great West Coast teams and some sensational players over the journey, but that team was stacked.
I also love watching the 90s fashion from the fans they were cutting to in Perth. That's something that I always laugh at, like that. There's girls there with the old Jennifer Aniston Friends hairstyle, like flowing over the one side kind of thing, like pure 90s fashion coming out of the West at that stage. Yeah, just great moments. I've enjoyed watching it on Fox. So, it's been good to reminisce. I think that just about does us, Drewy.
Yeah, I think rate, review, follow, get involved with us, because it's the off season. So, throw some questions at us and we'll get moving. I think we need to do a proper Willie Rioli sort of in-depth podcast at some stage. And I think that potentially there might be something from Asada coming out in the next few weeks as well. So that could be I think we need to get our journo hats on, Garby, and get stuck into that.
Sounds good. This has been fun. Nice to pay tribute to Lewis Jetta, look at our best 22s and talk a bit of Eagles nostalgia as well, Drewy Jones. Thanks so much. Thanks to everyone for listening. Good fun on the nest as always. And with the Eagles in our heart, we'll crack on to the next one.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
This week week at Safeway, shop the 10 for $10 produce sale. With the 10 for $10 produce sale, get items like large avocados, mangoes, green, red, orange, or yellow bell peppers, cucumbers, large lemons, or 16-ounce bags of Signature Farms baby peeled carrots for the member price of just $1 each. Plus, select meats like Signature Farms 80% lean ground beef and Signature Select extra meaty pork loin back ribs are buy one, get one free this week. Hurry in before these deals are gone. Visit Safeway.com for more deals.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.